Hello, everybody. Welcome to Adroit North America's new release of a exciting extension for Business Central called Adroit Forecaster. So today, Josh Isenberg and myself will be talking about all the ins and outs of the extension, and what led up to it, what's involved with it. We'll give you a quick run through the extension, and then from there we'll be open to some questions that you can submit via text. So, real quick on my background, I've been in the food and beverage industry and in technology for 30 plus years. And we formed Adroit about a little over 5 years ago with an idea to focus in on how to most effectively utilize Business Central. And then subsequently, we formed a great partnership with Appian and others. And through that, learned a lot about Business Central, strengths and weaknesses of it. And one of the things that we'll talk about is kind of like what you get out of the box with Business Central on the forecasting side, and the gaps that we saw and the steps we've taken to address it. As well, joining me, and Josh, maybe you can say a quick hello, is Josh Isenberg, who heads up our supply chain services.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for the intro. Over 15 years of experience in supply chain and supply chain technologies. Really excited about a fully embedded product in Business Central, which we're just going to walk through in a few seconds here. But I think it's going to bring a lot of value to companies who probably don't have another great option right now.
Great. So we started, as I mentioned, so we've been in working with Business Central now for 5 years, as many of you on the call today. And some things that we consistently have seen with our customers is really a slower adoption of planning in general, MRP scheduling, and then especially forecasting. And the challenges are that in Business Central, it's a pretty limited level of support that out of the box Business Central provides. And so we wanted to first bridge that gap and to bring to market something that really was innovative and really fully close the gap so that we can have a fully functional solution for Business Central. And then from there to take our supply chain expertise to really help customers to better absorb all these planning tools, forecasting, MRP, and scheduling to really drive improvements to fulfill their on time and full, to reduce stock outs and obsolescence and bring down their overall inventory levels where they have excess, and to reduce the schedule thrash. And that all stems from good plans and good schedules. So the question is like why use demand forecasting? And it comes down to having a situation where your supply lead time is greater than the the turnaround time or the service level that you need for your customers. So that can be for a couple of different reasons. It could be for, say, long raw material lead times. It could be for long productions or long transportation times. And so companies already today are doing some level of forecasting because they need to place bets, and they can buffer with these long supply lead times either via additional capacity, which will tend to take more of the form of a make to order type of a situation. So because they've got substantial capacity and good negotiated service levels with their customers, they can bring in an order and turn around that order within the required timeline and ship it. But that inherently means that we're potentially making bets with regards to raw material inventory. So even though it's a make to order, there's still some level of forecasting that's taking place in terms of what we expect in terms of consumption for raw materials, which can then either be via direct supply based on the required production orders, or required supply based on reorder points, right? So setting reorder points. So whether you're driving through to supply via kind of like a lot for lot coming out of the production order, or whether you're driving to a reorder point based on when raw materials get below a certain level, you're still placing bets there. And certainly for distributor models, many distributors that we've worked with over the years use par levels or reorder points for their finished items in inventory as well. But even those, we should be running some sort of a forecast to be able to inform us as to like what the par levels should be. So there's definitely a case for needing forecasting within business, and with Adroit Forecaster, we think there's some great tools that can help with this. So the idea is how to improve the accuracy of the projected usage, whether that's finished items or via MRP and MPS, drive that back to required raw material based off that finished projections as well. So again, the kind of the message here is just history repeats, but doesn't necessarily repeat exactly, but it rhymes. And so the idea is that by using a tool like Adroit Forecaster, which is grounded in statistics and what's historically happened in the past, and then being able to marry that up with your insights into the business to ultimately come up with an end collaborative forecast that can then drive the required production and purchasing. So the current state of Business Central's forecasting is one in which puts us in the worlds of like the forecast X and the net stocks, which is that we're taking sales history from Business Central and we're exporting that out into an external tool, running a forecast, and then bringing that back in via like a configuration package or utilizing the API, but then dropping that into the forecast details table. And then from there, Business Central does a nice job of consuming that forecast. But this forecast generation is necessarily external to Business Central today. There's a little bit of functionality there, but they didn't really kind of close the loop. So you can do some forecast setups and stuff, but really all it does is just drive this graphic over here on the item card. It doesn't really generate a forecast. Um, but what Microsoft did is they put out there is this Microsoft forecast learning machine learning engine for forecasting, and made that available. And so we're leveraging that tool in part to generate a forecast. But again, there's not really much out of the box supporting forecasting within Business Central until today. So today we're going to be talking. All the software that I show you is fully vetted live, but if later we get into conversations in terms of our roadmap and things like that, those are forward-looking statements. But all the software that we're going to show you today is live and available in AppSource. So when we look at the Adroit forecasting solution, the first thing to understand is that in order to generate a good statistical forecast, you need at least 24 periods of history or 2 years of history if you're using monthly buckets. And so that means for a lot of folks that have not necessarily been up on Business Central very long, or say have upgraded from Nav and didn't bring their sales history forward, um, we needed a way to bring that sales history in for consumption by Forecaster. Otherwise, if you just went live on Business Central, you'd have to wait really 2 years to be able to get a solid forecast inside of Business Central with Adroit Forecaster. So we developed a comprehensive sales history management tool, which lets us, and I'll show this to you in a minute, but which lets you kind of drag and drop all your sales history in, and then we merge that with the sales history coming out of the item ledger, so that we now have a consolidated sales history inside Business Central. But in loading the sales history, we haven't bogged down the item ledger and all the financial transactions required with it. So the option is right. You can drag the sales history in so that you've got a complete picture in terms of what predated Business Central as well as what you've shipped post Business Central. To then pull into the Adroit Forecaster, we take that sales history and push that out to the machine learning forecast engine for a write back, and then a whole hierarchy, which again, I'll take you through this in terms of being able to adjust, have multiple versions of the forecast, be able to compare forecasts, etc. So nice set of functionality here on the forecast. And then associated with it is a dashboard which gives us insights in terms of how do we do versus actuals. What did we actually run in terms of forecast? What was our MAPE score, which is a nice indicator of forecast accuracy, so that we can continually get better. And then lastly, we built an ability to import a forecast. So say your customers are providing forecasts, we can import those and merge those into the forecast as well. So once we've got consensus across the organization in terms of this is the forecast that we want to kind of quote book, we then publish that into the traditional demand forecast table, which you all are, I'm assuming, pretty familiar with. And then from there, the traditional MRP and MPS picks up that demand. So that's what I'm going to kind of show you today. Again, if you go out to App Source now, click in the thing and look on apps, you'll find our solution is out there, and this is how we go about and we deploy the application into your environment. And it consists of two pieces: the Adroit Forecaster and the Adroit Forecaster dashboard. Um, so let me go ahead and pull up Business Central here. So I'm in Business Central now, and so you can see that all the links and everything that we are running are sitting right inside Business Central. So all the things that you're used to in terms of setting up roles and setting up permissions and all that, that's all fully activated. So everything I'm going to show you today, I'm going to be running right inside the Business Central environment. So the extension via the Business Central Extension Manager takes the Adroit functionality and loads that straight in. So we talked about the sales history import. So we have a nice sales history import function, which will provide kind of like a drag and drop. Here you can see a couple of errors. This is to kind of highlight that all the error handling is built in as well. So as you load in, and we've loaded in several 100,000 records at a time with good performance. So we've kind of solved that whole mass load challenge. And it then allows you to, based on errors and filters, you can say, show me all the records that have errors that came in. And then we have a nice kind of breakout. So these numbers were in quotes, right? So they're not valid quantities, as an example. So a nice error handling to load in, and to then ultimately have this all kind of viewed in a nice table here. And one of the things that just to kind of show you here is that there's really three sources of sales history coming in. The first, which is historical from Excel, which is kind of like what you see here. This is all stuff that came in from Excel. The second is a batch load from item ledger, um, in which we're setting up kind of like a schedule or a batch. And the idea is that we don't want to bring in the item ledger history until we've closed the period, because we don't want to be forecasting partial periods. So we set up this periodic batch copy, and you can go ahead out and schedule it, or you can hard code it in, or you can just kind of manually run it. So that item ledger sales history comes in as well. And then the last thing um, in here is that you can also in the future bring in additional from Excel. And the reason you would do this is that say you're going to introduce a new item or bring up a new site or something, and so you don't have um, actual history for that item because it's a new item, but item XYZ has a similar demand profile that we would expect. You can kind of export the sales history from that like item, change up the item code, and then bring that back in so that and basically be able to generate a forecast for the new item based on the profile of a like item. So with the sales history having been loaded in, so now we go into Adroit Forecaster, and you can see that there's multiple forecasts that are in here. So to start with, you got 2025 base, and you can see that this is kind of like our budget that we set up. So we can go in and we can basically say, okay, we want this to be the baseline, and then we're going to generate a new forecast for, say, May, during the month of May or June, right? So each month we can create a new forecast. We can associate that back to the base forecast, so then we can do a comparison for, well, at the start of the year, we were projecting by a month this was going to be our overall demand. And how are we doing versus that? As well as we can do comparisons to, like, what did we forecast last month versus what are we forecasting this month? Again, it's just good insight to be able to understand how we're doing with the forecast. So in the sales and inventory forecast setup, this is the similar screen to which you would see in Business Central. We've added a couple features to it, but it's kind of the standard setup. In there, we're going to be setting time series models. This is kind of the default model. And there's a whole series of um, statistical options for here. And typically, what we recommend is to set a REMA plus ETS. This kind of pulls in the auto aggressive moving average, exponential smoothing, et cetera. So there's a whole range of statistical models that are covered by the ARIMA plus the ETS, and this would equate to kind of the traditional all setting would be ARIMA plus ETS. But then we set it up so that we can do overrides of individual um, time series, right? So you can set, say for example, or ETS plus ARIMA as a default, but then you can also come in and you can do overrides for specific items where based on the forecast results, et cetera. So you can out of the box override it here, as well as you examine the results of the forecast. I'll show you later as another place that you can override that statistical model. So a lot of flexibility in there. We're typically running periods of a month, and the horizon says how far out do you want to generate a forecast. In this case, we're going to go out 2 years. And historical periods back says how much history do you want to consume for the generation of the forecast. In this case, as I mentioned, we're going to say 2 years back. And then the variance percentage is a filter, which basically says if you have a large variation, like kind of like a one-time spike kind of a thing, what's that threshold of that variation to kick it out? And then we've got some nice tools to basically say which items forecasts were kind of rejected based on the delta being too high to the variance, and we've got some abilities then to manually assign like a moving average or a last x. So this is kind of the initial setup, and we can set it to forecast by location. So from here, then we then go into the Adroit Forecaster. In this case, this is a forecast that was generated in May. So click on generate the forecast, which then consumes all that history, goes out to the engine. Um, and again, we've run tests of several hundred thousand, and for a couple 100,000 records of history, it's typically taking Josh about 30 minutes. All right.
Yeah, it's sometimes even a little quicker as well.
Okay. So from a what we call a forecast hierarchy perspective, the hierarchy being item category, item, and location, right? So we can say um, show the locations and show the item categories. So then when we come into the hierarchy here, you can see the item categories and you can see under the item categories the individual SKUs. So we've built out this whole hierarchy to be able to manage the forecast. And so like what we're looking at right now is the plan. Um, but even here, like so for a particular, in this case, chair, you can see from a graphing perspective, like what was the plan, what was the prior year, what was the statistical, and I can kind of just highlight these and it'll show you like where you're at. So some nice graphical representation of that forecast correlated to like what you're clicking on from a row perspective, right? So as I click these, it'll show the individual items or the individual categories by location or not. So this depends on whether you have the location shown. So nice level. The previous year shows you what you actually did for this period the prior year, and then the statistical is what came back from the forecasting engine for initial write back. Now underneath that you can see adjustments. So what this allows you to do is say for chair, if I were to click in chair here and click on adjustment, I could then put in an adjustment, say for July. I already have 800 in here, but say I want to add another 100 to it, and I could pick a reason, and these are identifiable, like you can create these. So whatever events you want to capture for reasons, you can put in there. So say this is a seasonal adjustment, we can say okay. So then that's going to bump up the chair um, forecast, and then spread that across. Spread that across. Okay, where am I at here? So then that'll spread that across the items underneath that category. So with that, then there's a nice dashboard here, um, which allows you to kind of do a comparison of how we actually forecasted versus um, prior. So, for example, in this case, we were from a plan perspective, we were projecting to have a really high January, February, and March and April, but then the actual forecast that we generated came in much lower than that. Um, we have some nice accuracy metrics that have been built out. Um, Again, our data is kind of not the greatest data right now, but the idea would be is that you could select one of these forecasts, and then it'll show like some nice accuracy metrics here to allow you to kind of hone in on how good a job you're doing, and some of this is the date times as well. So that's been built out. Once the forecast has you've reached a consensus with it, you can then publish that out and you say yes, it's going to override it. And now, so what this is doing is it's pushing it out to the demand forecast table for consumption by MRP and MPS. So then if I come up here to the um, demand forecasts, you can see this is the traditional forecast table that everybody's familiar with. And this has all been written out for consumption by MRP and MPS. So inside, just to touch a little bit on the planning setups. So as in, there's kind of three options here. So first is like a fixed reorder quantity. So if you go into the item category, let me expand this out. If you go into the item category, the reorder policy, a fixed reorder point says that when inventory falls below a certain reorder point, go and kick it out and re-enter it. And that's kind of like the starting point. But if you want to use forecasting, what we recommend is that we go in and we set a lot for lot. And then when we run MRP, what we're going to do is to set it to use the forecast that's been identified. Okay, so again, this is all existing Business Central functionality. And we have consumption set. Business Central has consumption so that, say, for example, for a particular month, you're forecasting 100, but you've booked sales orders to 80. What the MRP and MPS engines are going to do is they're going to pick up the demand for 100. So they're not adding them. So it's a netting out. If say you have in month two a forecast of 200 but no sales orders, it's going to take the 200. And conversely, if the sales order quantity is greater than the forecast, it's going to take the sales order quantity. There's also some filters in there when you set up to run to basically say exclude it, exclude the forecast before a certain point. So the idea is that for next month, at this point, our orders are typically pretty well booked. So just exclude the forecast from it if you want. So those are just some quick tips in terms of how to use the forecast into MRP and MPS. And then again, it just kind of goes in and traditionally into the planning worksheet. So Josh, maybe you want to talk about some of the things that we need to do to get a good forecast.
Yeah, I mean, some of the key pieces that you've touched on a little bit, right, as we talk through bringing in sales history from a previous ERP, is we want to get at least 2 years of data in there so that the models can do their work to give you the best forecast. In addition, we want to have a kind of clean breakdown of where products are in terms of their groups. Ensure we only have the appropriate sales history. We're not kind of bringing in returns or free orders or things like that in there that could be affecting the way that the model is taking into account sales history. Um, but essentially, if you have clean data, you understand what products should be forecasted and shouldn't be forecasted, you can really get on with this product pretty quickly. The only thing, the call out here is that we're not bringing in all of your items. We're bringing in the products that you sell. Every other product that you have, whether that's in a bill of materials, packaging, or anything else that isn't sold. It's going to be handled in the MRP engine once the forecast is passed over, and it's going to generate all of those requirements that you need for the business to run. But those are kind of the key pieces to talk through there.
Yeah, some other keys is it's a collaborative effort. Um, and again, that's the advantage of having this all inside Business Central is that you can give the rights to the folks that you want to have access to be able to make adjustments to the forecast and solicit input, versus some of the external tools where it's isolated. So again, it's just all inside BC. And then this all fits into what's called a sales and operations planning agenda. So in addition to kind of like the tactical running MRP and MPS, it also sets the basis now for how do we do with our forecasts? What are we projecting out next month, next quarter? So it sets the basis for getting that overall sales and operations planning, which is really a big lift that Josh and his group really helped with. Um, Whole series of resources are out there. So we've got a guide to forecasting and a dashboard guide. So this is available as you download from the App Store. You can actually just subscribe to the application right through the App Store. And then Josh, maybe some of the things to improve planning as a service, like what's your team do?
Yeah, so we're focused on ensuring that you can kind of run your business end to end, right? How are you leveraging this forecast to drive an ROI for the business? A key piece for that is how you can take the forecast to set up their long-term purchasing contracts, how to manage your raw materials, how to set up safety stock, how to put in adjustments, how to better understand if seasonality is taken into consideration when you're putting together your forecast. A lot of this stuff may be intuitive or may not be intuitive for your group. If it isn't, we can come in, help teach your team how to run it on their own. If it's not a skill set you want to run in-house, we can come in and run it for you in a variety of different ways. But the key piece is that if you bring in our software, we give you 20 free consulting hours to help support. If that isn't enough, we're here for you. We know that the ROI is going to come from the product and the value that's there. And we want to ensure we can prove that to you.
So we partnered with Rocky Mountain Chocolate Factory, and we've got some nice case studies out on our YouTube channel, et cetera. But maybe just talk about like what were some of the challenges facing Rocky, Josh, and kind of like where they're at and kind of how they went through this journey because they're running the tool today. So
Yeah, so Rocky Mountain didn't have anyone on the team who was responsible for forecasting or demand planning before we jumped in. So we developed a crash course to help them understand the fundamentals of demand planning and forecasting so they can run this tool effectively and really drive the value through the business. So we worked with multiple team members without any forecasting background. And then they were able to kind of quickly come up to speed on what it takes, what you need to be looking at, and how to run their whole process effectively. So once we mapped that out for them and they started forecasting on their own, they really had a massive increase in their forecast accuracy. They were able to kind of quickly understand what products should or shouldn't be forecasted, how to quickly, using the graphics and reporting we have, what didn't look good and did look good to the eye so they can quickly make adjustments and changes. And then through that entire process, once a lot of trust was built into the forecast, we had that integrated business process or S&OP to allow the business to collaboratively plan so they can now be able to take better steps to looking at their long-term pricing, their contracts, their safety stock, how much inventory be able to put out a schedule that was more than 2 or 3 days out. They can go weeks or months out. They can better plan for holidays to see when they're going to be over or under capacity, how to bring in and manage labor and ensure they can kind of um, hit all their orders during peak times without having to run 24/7. So it's a real great opportunity to kind of showcase the value of the tool, be able to bring people on who don't have, 10, 15 years of experience in forecasting or even seen the tool before, can kind of quickly come in and be real successful.
Yeah, it was part of an overall ERP implementation too. So like we went through a full ERP, Appian Food and Beverage ERP, right? So this is all fully compatible with Appian F&B as well. But we took them through the full ERP deployment, and concurrent with that, we work with them on the forecasting. So we literally went live with the ERP and the forecasting on the same day, and it's been a great success. Yeah, so adroitsupplychain.com, or you can find both Josh and I on LinkedIn. I'm sure we're connected with one of us is probably connected with most everybody on the call today. But you send us an IM or send us an email, reach out. Love to collaborate with you and bring value to your organization. So thanks so much for spending some time with us today.